You're with Aubrey Masango
on 702. Let's walk the talk.
Andisa Ramavhunga is my guest, Group Chief Advisor at Andisa Consulting. We are going to be having a series of conversations as we continue. As I say, this is a marathon, folks. This is not a sprint. Really trying to get into a better understanding of the concepts that we need to have under the knee in order for us to be effective in our entrepreneurial journey. And tonight we're talking about the whole idea of how to craft a customer-centric value proposition. What is that, Andisa? Thank you very much for joining me, my brother. Thank you very much for coming through to studio. I really appreciate it, by the way.
Thank you, Aubrey. It's so good to be back.
What is that? How to craft a customer-centric value proposition?
You would remember, Aubrey, when we first spoke the last time I was here.
Yeah.
We spoke about value creation as the pinnacle of a sustainable business. And we spoke about how do you unlock cash flow potential using your business model. This really follows through from that. The anchor of a business model, remember there were three main ideas I pitched at the time.
Yeah.
It was around, do you have a desirable product? Is it feasible for you to deliver on? Is it profitable, or can you make money doing it? And really that's the definition of a business model and how to create value as a strategy. Now, if you were to zoom in into some of the concept, particularly in that desirability factor, because that's where the strategy hits the road. That's the be it and end all. Because once you have those ideas clearly defined and in place, the rest of the elements of the business model around feasibility and the modeling then of cost and revenues to determine whether you can make money or not really flows from that. But the basis of a sustainable competitive advantage lies in that area of desirability, which is a function of a customer value proposition. I'd expand the idea and say a customer value proposition a lot of time is often confused with just a goods and services, a product that a business delivers to customers, which is a very good starting point, because any business that starts, it always starts with an idea, which is a product in essence. But quickly you'll see that to scale that product, you do need an element of understanding the customer segments, or the need or the benefit that accrues to people who are willing to part with money to pay for the goods. That's the start of crafting a customer-centric value proposition. Because at the end of the day, you have to remember that whatever product you have, whether it's an app or it's a goods and services or it's a service itself, if in a professional services, always fulfills a need or always tries to resolve a customer pain point.
So I'm going to try and reverse engineer what I think I'm hearing from you, right? Very often, a guy knows how to do something. Maybe he's a good panel beater. He can really fix a car if it's been in a crash. Or can cook amakuinya very, very well, right? Or can, whatever it is that they can do at a technical level very, very well. And many times somebody who is able to do something very, very well, Ramiti, she can make 7 colors meal very, very well and decides to start a catering business because she is good at cooking, right? What I'm hearing you say is that that's not enough. Being technically proficient at the production of a product that you can perhaps sell may not be enough. You're saying that particular product has got to be relevant to the market to the extent that it becomes a business. So over and above your proficiency, over and above the fact that you can panel beat, over and above the fact that you can make curtains like, I don't know, a connoisseur, over and above the fact that you can make a makwina that would make you remember the days of your youth, you've got to understand that there's another element that needs to be injected in that equation, and that is a value proposition that goes beyond just the product, if I'm hearing you properly.
Absolutely correct, Aubrey. And I'll try to use examples as far as I can so that at least it crystallizes what I'm talking about in the mind. So having a product, although it's a very good start, it's not the
Especially if you can do it well too, yeah?
Sometimes you can,
Yeah.
Sometimes you can sustain a product in a long run in a market, but you'll soon quickly run into competitive problems because often products are easy to copy. You lose that first mover advantage. You now start competing in the market, and just delivering a product just becomes an order qualifier, but not an order winner, because there's other elements that will then dictate depending on the customer segments that you are targeting. And I'll give you an example. If you remember theme parks in South Africa, for those who are old enough, there was
Gold Reef City.
Gold Reef City is actually a better variation of it.
Yeah.
If you remember, there was a product called ShareWorld.
Oh yes,
Back in the day,
yes.
Back in the day, which was, I think, a very novel, almost close to the Disney type a value proposition. It's a product, and they were able to build it and attract lots of money to build a product. But we have to ask ourselves, why did it fail? And my simple deduction of why it failed, I think although the product was good, so there was a value that was being created, but there wasn't enough people who were willing to pay for that product so that it is sustainable. So it's quite important that when you craft a value proposition, you have the market in mind. And there's a number of things that come through crafting a value proposition. I said there's a product. A product derives a benefit for someone who's paying, but they are paying much more than for that benefit. There are other elements that a person has to consider. Price, for example. At what price point are you lending that value proposition? Is it flexible? Is it of the right quality? Is it is it, I mean, how are you delivering it? How are people accessing it? So there are a number of other factors you have to think about it. And I'd like to mirror, because it's like the same or different sides of the same coin, with the value proposition and the customer segment. And hence, that's why when you think about the one, you have to always balance the other. So the first port of call once you have a product is really thinking about that other element of or other side of the coin, which is the market segment. Are you serving a mass market segment, right? Is it a niche? What is really the pain point that those customers are trying to solve? I go back to the Uber example that I think we spoke about the other time. You might misconstrue the Uber as a product being a taxi service. Yeah. But a buyer of an Uber service buys much more than a taxi service. But because if you think about it, there are other taxi services. I mean, even e-hailing services that are out there. If you remember, there's Bolt, which has its own challenges, by the way. Both of them offer the same product, but I would argue Uber has a probably much better perceived value compared to Bolt because of safety. Which is another consideration you have to think about. So people who are buying Uber are buying much more than just a ride. They're buying safety. They're buying convenience. They're buying even the ability to track your loved ones when they are moving. They are buying reliability. They are buying even the price, because the price point that Uber is able to deliver that service is probably much better than what non-e-hailing services would do.
So the more traditional sort of taxi services.
Yes.
And I wish that many of them would be listening to this kind of conversation. Maybe we wouldn't be having the tragic story that we saw at Maponya Mall the other day if members of the traditional taxi business understood that it's not just about being able to provide a car that's going to move people from one place to another. There is all sorts of ancillary added upon values that go with this. And it's not just that guy has a car and he can drive people around. There's more to this, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I spoke of a product being just an enabler or the first port of call in establishing a value proposition. And I'll come back to this example because I think it's quite a critical one and one that's very close to my heart around how these other taxi operators can compete with the likes of Uber and Bolt
and so forth. Yeah.
And the one that just left now, the Chinese one, I forget the name now. So the product is made up of the benefit that you can derive, which is a function of the features that the product has. And let's talk again, Uber. The features that are there is that they've got an app. So you can call it at the convenience of your own home. That app has got some element of security at the other end that qualifies the drivers. It's not anyone and everyone that can pick you up. So there's some security checks that have been done there. They've added other innovative technologies, like you can listen into the ride while you are leaving. There's a GPS functionality that allows you to map the route and decide whether the guy is going the right route or not. You can share that ride with people for your own safety.
Yeah.
Now, those are all features that fulfill the benefits that the customer accrues. But there's also the emotional side of it, which more often than not is a function of marketing, where you start creating a vibe and a hype around your product. And unfortunately for the traditional taxi operators, they have to at least match the Uber service at some point. So you have to have an app, because we know technology is moving in that direction that allows for one to deliver a product or a service at a very cost-effective point of view. But the emotional side of it is where I guess, or I believe, the other e-hailers or non-e-hailers can play in, which is one around nationalism. One of the grudge purchases I have, particularly as a person, when I buy Uber or Bolt, is that these are non-South African companies. Right? I mean, I'm taking money to the Americans, and I think Bolt is from somewhere in Europe. There was one called Didi, the Chinese one. It's always that gripe. But guess what? For me, I'm buying more the benefits that accrue. But if they were to harbor on this point of nationalism, to say we are building something that's homegrown, something that benefits the local economy. We are empowering our own, using marketing, by the way, as a tool and not violence, obviously.
Yeah.
The one that they are now resorting
because I was going to call you xenophobic just now.
Resorting to. So there is quite a lot of space. And by the way, these are not concepts that can only be applied to taxi operators. I'm thinking for young guys who are out there and into the space of home connectivity. What do you call these products like Zoom, and there's a Microsoft one called Teams. There's also another angle, by the way. If we were to have a locally made South African product, that one guarantees that our data is secure, is sitting in South Africa. We have probably an uninterrupted supply, because guess what? If the Americans decide to switch us off, all of a sudden all these technologies and the benefits that they accrue to us are gone. Now you can do exactly the same thing that they are doing, but also harp on the emotional element that says it's homegrown, it's securitized, it's consistency of availability of access. And the interesting part with that is that you stop competing on price. Once you start playing on this emotional element of the side of crafting the value proposition, you start not becoming a price taker. Right?
I watched how even in the most dire economic situations, companies that sell niche products or exclusive products, whether it is Mont Blanc or whatever the case may be, did better in times when economies are facing down than they did under the normal circumstances. I'm thinking around the time of the shutdowns, the COVID-19 shutdowns. The luxury goods people did better then than people who you would imagine would do well under very difficult economic circumstances. And it speaks to what you're talking to now, that it is more than just the pen. It is what the pen represents. It is the exclusivity that it represents. And people buy that over and above the value proposition of the item. There's more to it, is what you're saying to me.
Absolutely. Coming back to this analogy, it's unbelievably so. You know what's happening now in Russia and around Ukraine. I read some story that says a lot of people are now starting to buy a Rolex as a store of value. Now we have to think about what a Rolex is. I mean, it's a very simple mechanical tool that tells time.
Yeah.
But what makes it so unique and so different that people are willing to spend tons and tons of money in securing it, not only as a watch, but as a storer of value. It is the way that that product has been positioned in the mind of a consumer, which all has to do about emotions. I'll laugh with you and give you another anecdotal example. I think this was around about 2018, a Rolex worn by Eric Clapton was sold at $1.5 million US. This is a watch that probably cost a fraction of the price to manufacture. Now, it tells you that there is something that Rolex is doing around positioning themselves in the mind of the customer. Sure, there are two schools of thought, right? That says, what is it that my product can do that is similar to other products? And what is my point of differentiation? And I would argue that the points of parities between watches are minute. The points of differentiation is how they've positioned that product.
What sort of mind share do they control?
Control, and what people perceive.
Share,
perceive that watch to be worth. And that's where the school of marketing plays a good role, because there's brand propositions that also come into.
I want to invite you into this conversations as I have this conversation with Andisa Ramavhunga. He is Group Chief Advisor at Andisa Consulting. And the conversation we're having at the moment is how to craft a customer-centric value proposition. Now, it's a very big bunch of words, right? But it's really about how do you become sustainably relevant in the market that you serve. Isn't it?
Absolutely.
How do you become sustainably relevant in the market that you serve? And what I'm beginning to understand, folks, is that it's not just the proficiency of your craft. It's not your prowess in the making of a thing. It's all of the other issues that go with it. I want to bring it down perhaps to a level that is more understandable to me. I'm fascinated each time I go to Groblersdal or to Venda, I'm fascinated by a phenomenon that I always talk about, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to break it down for me. You'll find mamas on the side of the road at any time of the day selling fruit. 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter. They are there selling fruits. Many of these moms have put children through universities, multiple children through universities. They all sell exactly the same products, right next to each other. Why is it that they have been collectively successful and individually successful while they are all selling the same product? I want you to think about that, right? I want to understand why it is, for example, that every time at home there's a function, we will leave where I now live in Johannesburg and travel to Mabopane to go and get the scones, right? From a particular individual who makes the scones. Let me tell you, there's maybe 500,000 other people that can make scones that way. But we go to that particular person. I want you to think about why, and maybe why this is relevant to the conversation we're having here at the moment. Because I think that we as South Africans sometimes get caught up in the idea that I can make scones. And sometimes we mystify the whole thing and say, but tell her was gara. You know what I'm trying to say? But what you are saying to me is that the woza can be actually thought through a marketing process, marketing driven process. There's ways of thinking about business that can make you sustainably relevant to your market segment without having to throw in the woza. Yeah?
Absolutely.
By the way, you'll remember, folks, that I am on a mission to teach us how to hunt. I truly believe that the time has come as South Africans that we need to learn how to hunt. I tell a story of a little meme or of a reel that I saw on social media of a little dog, trusted dog in that family, barking at very late at night, barking. It's the trusted guard dog of the family. And lo and behold, at that moment, you see a leopard jump over the fence. You see the dog run out of the screen. And then a few moments later, you see the leopard with the dog in its mouth running away with the dog. And the dog is the dinner for that particular night. if we don't learn to hunt, if we don't learn to understand some of these concepts that you're talking about, that it is more than just the product, bruh. It's more than whether or not you can make these cons. It's more than whether or not you can panel beat well. It's more than just you being able to make curtains. There are other considerations to be put into the equation that are going to make sure that we have a sustainable presence in the market. And if we don't do that, we are going to be the dog that gets eaten, right?
Absolutely.
Right. I want to take some calls. But talk to me about that phenomenon. As you drive into Venda, it's something that I've watched for years. As you drive into Groblersdal, it's something that I've been watching for years, decades it's been happening. Why is it that those businesses have been sustainable for such a long time? What is it they know and are doing that goes beyond just the supplying of fruits and veggies?
Yeah. So the first simple answer, Aubrey, it will be that those people are creating enough value for a big enough population. That's why they're being able to sustain themselves. But the question I have, though, with those business model is their ability to scale and them moving out of those stalls and creating medium businesses that can absorb large amounts of people in terms of creating employment and creating value and benefits. Because as a company and you're corporatized, you start to create much more social benefit than just being a one-man stall. So I think they are able to survive. There's a whole lot of communal intervention in there. And it's quite interesting that you mentioned that. You'll see that it's not only those mamas, by the way. I mean, try going to Randburg, for example, in a barber shop, and you get a number of these guys who are all waiting to cut hair.
Yeah.
And you'll see quickly that there's one that you connect with and start creating a relationship with. Yeah. And you'll then tend to gravitate towards them whenever you meet in a bunch of those people. So to add or to advance the argument, there are two other segments, by the way, that helps you craft that value proposition. And one of them is customer relation management. How well are you at thinking and executing customer relation management strategies? Do you engage on one-on-one? Do you write them? I'll tell you, my Baba now, obviously I can't mention his name. I hope I can. He writes me SMSs on a regular basis. A small guy in Randburg. He writes me SMSs and say, "Hey Baba, I have not seen you in 2 weeks. We are overdue for a haircut." Right. On COVID time, he used to write me an SMS and say, "Hey Baba, I now do services at home
visits,
home visit."
Yeah.
So now that starts talking to the types of customer relationship management that you have with your people. And I guess with the mamas as well, there is one good mama, by the way. I hope I can mention her. It's Veronica in the Randburg. Always buy my scones there without fail, because you know that the service is reliable. You can call before you even come. Those scones will be delivered there. She always delivers on time. The quality is always right. And naturally, whenever there's a bereavement or a celebration, and I'm not the only one, I'm sure there are a number of people who gravitate towards that business. So there is a way that she's doing to keep the customers, but it's through customer relationship management. That's one aspect of it that plays probably a big role with those mamas there. Although you might see them sitting in stores like that, they'll probably have dedicated customers who flock into them, who sustain those businesses. So they are creating a big enough value or solving a real meaningful problem for other people, because people, I mean, the reason why we travel back and forth and taking that inconvenience is because we've priced it in that value proposition, and that's why it will make sense for us to go there. The other element of it is the channels that they use, businesses particularly.
Before you go into that, I want to take some calls of some people that have been waiting. But remember, folks, I want your curiosity to be ignited here, folks. These are the strategies, the tips that we need to know in the hunting game. This is how you hunt. Yeah? We got to start hunting. And Bumulelo is in Santon. Bumulelo, hi. Your thoughts?
Hey, how are you guys?
Very good, man. Very good. What is on your mind, Bumi?
Good. I'm in Ramavhunga. Thank you so much, man, for coming to. And what you said about the mamas who sit on the side of the road, I'd probably want to add this to the conversation. I think this is also a study that was done by Clayton Christensen, who wrote the famous The Innovator's Dilemma.
Yeah.
He speaks about jobs to be done. And he looked at McDonald's milkshakes. He looked at McDonald's shops. McDonald's wanted to add more flavors into the milkshakes, and people didn't buy milkshakes when they changed those flavors. But the question that he asked is, what job does a milkshake actually do for people who buy it at 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. in the morning? And that job is just easy. I mean, a milkshake will keep you full until 10 a.m., with most people only wanting to eat after 10 a.m. It replaces the bagel, because you only can have a bagel with both hands. You can only have a banana with both hands. But with a milkshake, it's convenient enough that there's only 3 flavors that you can pick from. Use one hand. You can use one hand while you're driving. So you hop into the shop, you get a milkshake, you hop out, you still use one hand to drive. So that's the job that it serves. So over and above what the product actually does, over and above its primary
utilitarian sort of,
Yes. So over and above that, it actually creates a different value to the actual customer who purchases it. And again, marketing and brand positioning and product positioning plays a huge role in how people perceive the product and also how you communicate what your product does. I just want to add that to the conversation. And
Oh, thanks a lot, Mpumi. I really appreciate it, man.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Be good, Baba.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, so I can take a number of examples. Let's take Netflix as well to talk to Mpumelele's example. Netflix is a content library. But guess what? There are a number of other content libraries. I'll mention Showmax,
Prime,
MultiChoice. But you'll see that with Netflix, the value proposition is made up of a product, which is movies and documentaries that you can watch, similar to MultiChoice. So what people are buying there is pleasure or entertainment. But Netflix took the concept further and say, not only will we give you that, but we'll also make recommendations based on what we've watched. Now, all of a sudden, it declutters the platform. I struggled when I went to, for example, DSTV, without saying that. I'm not saying they're a bad product, by the way. South African grown, good product. But what I find more appealing with Netflix compared to the likes of Disney and the other ones is the ability for them to recommend movies that I've watched based on what I've watched before. And they start curating my watching patterns and providing recommendations on what I can watch. So that does a couple of things. It declutters the library. It gets you watching things much quicker. They know where you're spending your time and so forth. And I found that invaluable, that I'll gravitate towards Netflix when I want to watch movies than the other platforms, because I spend less time going through the catalog and more time watching. So you ask me why do I buy Netflix, or why would people buy Netflix? It's not just about the movies, but it's about the ease to access the right content that you want, that resonates with you. So we can have a number of examples with that says, and you take cars, for example, and we had this conversation, you and I, that says, why do people buy certain cars, right? I mean, people buy Toyota because it has this perceived quality, reliability. It has less breakages. Volvo is about safety. Mercedes, it's about luxury and opulence. Ferrari is about speed, adrenaline junkie, right? But these are all cars, and yet they attract different types of customers. That's why it's quite important to understand what need are you serving in the market. Are you serving a speed need? Are you serving a quality need? Are you serving a esteemed or luxury or talk to
an emotional
status? And yet they're all cars. So you have to, when you craft your value proposition, think beyond product. And by the way, this is not an academic exercise, right? Because once you start out with a product, you go out to the market, you interact with the market and you get feedback. It starts asking you typical things around what is it that people are buying from me? What features can I build into my product or services? I mean, if you ask the mamas, for example, one of the things could be, why do I have the same traffic coming to my stall at certain times of the day? Why can't I deliver to them and maybe price more? So all of a sudden you're selling still the same product, but you're starting to add certain services that says 5 o'clock for this type of customers, I'm delivering a certain type of veggies and so forth before they get home to cook. Because those customers are buying more the convenience, or they're buying more their time because they don't have time, or they waste a lot of time coming to the stalls and buying the goods that they need to cook on the day. Why don't you just deliver them on the door? So these are things that entrepreneurs need to grapple with in terms of improving their value proposition. Obviously, you grow small. You start adding more features, eventually up until you get to the emotional side, because this is where now things start becoming interesting as a business. One of the analogies before you come in, Aubrey, is that I always have when I speak to my people at the firm, is to ask yourself, where do I want to be as a business? And I'll answer that for you, Aubrey, is that I want to be a monopoly. This is always my ultimate goal. I think anyone of business is ultimate goal, because being a monopoly means you are the only one who's servicing that entire market. Now it's very difficult to be in a monopoly without artificial barriers, whether through regulations or being in an industry that has high barriers to enter. But those are artificial barriers.
Do we have such monopolies that are not created by artificial barriers?
Yeah. So it's about positioning in the mind, right?
Right.
I go back to the concept of why is, for example, Coca-Cola a monopoly in South Africa. They have no regulations that says go buy Coca-Cola. In fact, they have more pressures from regulations around reducing sugar content and so forth. But as a product and how they've packaged and positioned themselves, they practically run the soft drinks game in South Africa and probably Africa, probably less so in other parts of the world. They've crafted this emotional side of things. The other way, by the way, if you were interested in pianos, Steinway piano is another phenomenal case study that if people are interested can read upon. They don't manufacture a lot of these pianos in a year. They come a heck of a lot expensive. But what you are buying in there is more the name and the association created by it, because it's used in big opera houses in very prestigious places. Naturally, it will then attract the people who are self-actualized. I'm
hoping that in our conversation tonight, we're going to be able to drill down and look at some entrepreneurial ventures that are typical to our communities, and say this principle of trying to create a sustainable value proposition can be used this way. We've already touched on the taxis business. I really hope that the taxi guys are listening, because this is critical stuff, right? Otherwise, we are always going to mystify ourselves and think that the only way to compete is to burn people's cars. When in fact, if we just use a little bit of our gray matter, we may find that there's an opportunity there that can give us long-standing sustainability in that space. Now, I've seen how just the way that certain department stores place sweets and all of these goodies as you reach the tills, how it works with my kids. It works because there's no way I'm not going to buy Twinkies or a packet of chips or some nuts, because I'm walking right through this aisle of goodies with him. There's no way my boy is going to let me not buy the stuff that's on those aisles. And that's just a little bit of thinking and innovation that then positions you more sustainably in that particular market. I want to take some calls. TC Maila is on the line, a very good friend of mine, an amazing photographer, by the way. An amazing photographer. I'm serious. This guy's a genius. He is an absolutely amazing photographer, and he takes pictures of indigenous settings, Komarai, and all of those kinds. Sorry, TC, I'm selling you there for a second. How you doing, my brother?
It's been a long time, bro.
It has been a long time. I'm good, man. I'm very good. Are you enjoying this conversation?
Oh, first of all, my condolences, bro.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
I'm really, really sorry about what happened.
Appreciate it. Appreciate your kind words.
Yes, I am. I was like, geez, I haven't called your platform in more than a year. The last time I think I spoke to you, it's when you hosted me.
Yes.
And I'm just listening to this, and I'm thinking in our industry, which is the creative industry, I often hear people say, so and so is underrated. And I always say, but you might find that the word underrated, it's in its true form, it simply means bad marketing. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are not appreciating what you're doing or what you're creating or what you're serving. But it just simply means that you have not mastered the market, you have not mastered selling, you have not mastered how to package your product, you have not mastered how to wrap around the story around the product or the service that you are offering.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people make this mistake of thinking that talent or creativity is good enough alone.
Yeah.
It's never good enough. There's so much. There's creation and there's the business side of things. You know, I had to learn the hard way, whereby I thought the images I create were good enough for anybody to endorse them, but only to realize later on that no, there's what we call the business of the art.
Yeah.
And that is a different animal, that is a different game. And this is why you'd find people that keep on saying that your work is amazing and they look up to you, but you find that their work is actually being bought or being appreciated more than yours. And it finds itself in spaces that you wish to be in. And you wonder, but how? It's simply because they understand the business of the art.
TC Maila. Listen, my brother.
I just think that sometimes you can never blame the client when someone is not buying your product, but just look at yourself and look at the business model and find people. Always find people that can help do the things that you're not passionate about, which are needed in order to take your product to different heights.
TC Maila, I'm going to let you go. my apologies. TC Maila is in Johannesburg. Lloyd, you're in Midrand. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thanks, man. What is on your mind?
I'm good. I just want to say thank you for this conversation. It's a good conversation. I'm interested in advertising and marketing. So in the meantime, I am busy with a platform of marketing, which is outside digital marketing and billboards and all of these things. One of the things that I realized is there is always a space in everything, but you just need to find that space that you can actually create, and then get your clients to see the space and work onto that space. But yeah, this is a good conversation, and I am happy.
Are you finding, Lloyd, that TC just spoken about the fact that we need to find ways of telling the story of our businesses in ways that are more sustainable, and that means people such as yourself that are in marketing and advertising. What are you finding is the biggest blind spot in the way that most entrepreneurs think about their businesses that would exponentially grow their businesses? What are you finding out there?
In the meantime, what I've found is I am going into direct marketing to a point where I need to reach out to a whole lot of number of people that would see my client product directly every day when they are going to work and coming back from work. So that is a space where I want to explore and go into where a person, if you are saying you're selling a funeral cover, and there's someone who wants a funeral cover, that person has to see that funeral cover every day when they are going to work and going home every day. So if then that person needs a funeral cover, in their mind, that funeral cover is there because they read about it in the morning, they read about it in the evening. So their decision, the probability of them taking a decision of taking that funeral cover is probably 8 out of 10.
Lloyd in Midrand, thanks very much for your call. Andisa?
So Lloyd is mentioning a very important and critical point I think any business needs to understand. And that is the role of marketing in crafting a value proposition. And that falls under that last bucket, the fourth bucket I wanted to talk about, which is channel. I mean, channel is about how do you create brand awareness? How do you get customers to sample your product or service? How do you then deliver that product or service? And then how do you manage the after-sales process? But there's a fundamental nugget that I think over the years of being in business that I've come to appreciate about marketing. For me, marketing does, except just brand awareness and product awareness, marketing can add value in two ways. One is to get entrepreneurs to understand their products well in terms of what is it that is similar to other products and what is different to those competing products, and be able to hop on or sell their points of differentiation, because that's what differentiates them from the competition. But the most important thing is on the customer segmentation side is to find a big enough customer segment that would buy the product just based on those points of differentiation. So to me, marketing then becomes a winner, and not just about billboards and not just about putting advertising pages in a magazine, but really around and getting an entrepreneur to understand what are the points of differentiation and who do we sell those points of differentiation to, because those are the type of customers where you don't compete. That's the monopoly we were talking about.
How do I ascertain exactly that? How do I understand? I mean, I've seen how it's been tragic to watch how people that don't have a marketing understanding but have big budgets have really sent out messages that are cringeworthy, messaging that is so unrelated and maybe even so that just isn't listening to, that is tone deaf. I watch how government departments will buy a whole big piece of a newspaper and spend, and it's just tone deaf. It just says all of the wrong things. It's not done with the right sensitivities. How do we get to that place?
Yeah, as I've mentioned, it has to do with, I mean, governments, as an example, are delivering a certain mandate to their citizens. And unfortunately or fortunately for them, those citizens are diverse in terms of where they are in the process of development in life. Education, economy, work, community involvement, and so forth. So it's really, I mean, you can, by the way, use that basis as a way of segmenting your market. I mean, to answer your question simply, to me, it's a sign of not really having a highly segmented approach to delivering a message. Because if you know that you are talking to high esteemed people who value more the prestige, it's a different message that you throw to them, rather than the bottom of the pyramid where the questions are about bread and butter. There you come with it could be a similar type of message you're trying to land, but you land it in a
tailored and customized to that specific.
And for me, that's what marketing is all about. So when I spoke about the points of parity, which are things that are the same throughout your products, as well as points of difference, is to say, what is it that we are doing different to your competitors? And you need to then take that message to the market. And not only take it to the market in a blind way, but understand who in the market deems these points that are different as a benefit to them. And this is where you then tailor make that strategy of communication. And it also dictates now where do you publish your articles, right?
Yeah,
It's probably, I mean, your advertisement is probably not a billboard, but maybe an engineering magazine, because that's where people will understand your message.
Your process of communication to your market becomes bespoke, right?
Bespoke, or sometimes not even going marketing at all, right?
Yeah.
Or just doing activations and events, inviting people who would understand the message, who would understand the brief.
I want to take one more call from Ronnie in Johannesburg. Hi, Ronnie.
Hi, Aubrey. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you for making it, man.
I just landed in Johannesburg, and I got the tail end of the conversation. And, I'm in the FMCG space,
Yeah.
And I'm a consultant. My DNA is obviously commercial in sales and marketing over 25 years. And I'm helping quite a few companies, but the one that I'm driving right now is two young black entrepreneurs that came and seen me regarding their crime, and we basically changed.
Oh, Ronnie, we're losing you, man. Everything you're saying is being lost in the ether because of a bad connection there. Perhaps we'll get Ronnie back at some other time. Firwan One, or the Lion, says, my brother sells tasty kotas in Alex. People love him and look forward to buying from his tuck shop. The reason people like him is because he likes singing gospel songs a lot. He'd start singing loudly in the morning till late. People have him nicknamed Singing Guys. I think that's what he's trying to say. He's got a particular nickname. But it's those kinds of peculiarities that we should be focusing on, yeah?
Yeah, no, maybe you're buying a
Holy Quarter.
Holy Quarter.
In Alex. What good can come out of Alex? Holy Quarter.
And you only market to churches and aligned institutions. So that's quite interesting.
Listen, we've run out of time, but I'm excited by the way that this conversation went today, because I think a lot of people are starting to realize that it's not just about the product.
No.
That there are all sorts of other added value concepts that make that product perhaps more bespoke, that I feel an affinity to the point where I'm willing to make a sacrifice to go and get that product, whatever goal means. I really appreciate you coming through, my brother. And where do we hear more of this kind of conversation?
I've been promising to deliver a podcast that will delve deeper into these concepts. And this is just a tip of an iceberg. We've just touched a bit on customer segmentation. There's a whole lot of science and art that goes in, even customer value proposition. I mean, we have not come to say, do you compete based on price, or do you compete based on quality and all those things that come in the channels we've not even started exploring. I'm hoping to launch the podcast probably in the next 2 weeks or so, definitely before the end of June. So that we get going. We'll delve deeper into this, and then we'll provide people with more details on how to access the podcast. But currently they can
get in touch with you.
Yeah, they can get in touch. We can go through our website, www.ndisoconsulting.co.za. Or alternatively, you can drop us an email on info@ndisoconsulting.co.za.
Andisa Ramavhunga, Group Chief Advisor at Ndiso Consulting. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Aubrey. After the news, we talk about the phenomenon of quiet promotions. Whoa, that's going to be a great conversation.